We all set? Call the meeting to order. This is the May 26, 2015 meeting of the Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. First item on the agenda is bills and communications and meeting minutes from May 12, 2015. Have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Barrett.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Alessi. Everybody have that? Any questions? Any changes, additions? Good to me. We're good? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Minutes are adopted unanimously. Next item is 908 Fairfield Beach Road, recommendation on town acquisition of land.
Okay, there was information in your packet that outlines this request. The town currently has a 1/3 interest in this particular property by virtue of a bequest. It is now seeking RTM approval to obtain the other 2/3 interest in the property. The statutes do require a report from this commission, which is advisory to the RTM as to whether or not you think it's a good idea for the town to acquire this property. The Conservation Commission supported the request because it would create the only Fairfield Beach Road access to the Pine Creek Salt Marsh and has some open space attributes. Other than that, there's more details in the packet that we gave you, but you are making a report to the RTM as to whether you think the town should acquire the property or not. If you think that it's not in the town's interest to do so, and that is your report, it would require a 2/3 vote of the RTM to make the acquisition. Otherwise, a favorable report, it would be a simple majority. If you have any other questions, we can go from there.
All right. Why don't we have a motion to get the conversation started?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we make a favorable recommendation on the town acquisition of this land at 908 Fairfield Beach Road.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Barrett and second by Commissioner Jacobson for a favorable recommendation on the application, on the proposal. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I read the report. Based upon the report and the approvals from the Land Acquisition Commission and Conservation, I didn't see anything in it that would lead me to think that this was not in the town's interest to purchase this property, from a land use standpoint. So I'd be happy to hear other opinions, but that's I figured at least get a motion to talk about it.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Anyone else? Commissioner Jacobson.
I agree. I read the report, and it seems like a very favorable move for the town.
Anyone else? No? Yeah, I agree. We already own 1/3, so it does make sense. From a land use perspective, the uses are appropriate as to control the salt marsh and the environmental concerns and so forth. So I'm not passing judgment on the negotiated amount. It does, though, seem to be supported by the appraisal and the recommendations. But from purely land use planning perspective, it makes sense to me. Anyone else? No? We ready to vote? All right. Motion on the table is to approve a favorable recommendation. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. Next item are new applications to recommend a public hearing. 201 Commerce Drive, special exception application of Penske Automotive for additions and alterations to establish an automotive repair facility in the Design Industrial District.
This 201 Commerce Drive is currently occupied by Master Electric Supply. It's been there for a long time. It's amid the other holdings of the Penske group down there with Mercedes and other dealerships. They're looking to expand their service and repair offerings within their dealership realm, and so they are looking to change the use of this building, which does require a special exception.
Motion?
I'll make a motion to move the public hearing.
Motion to move the public hearing by Commissioner Alessi. Second by Commissioner Noonan. Any questions for staff? Hearings required. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Move to public hearing unanimously. Next is 92 Post Road, special permit application of Taza Osteria and Bar for an addition to enclose an existing patio in the design commercial district.
Yeah, this is the former pizza center on Post Road. Last year, an outdoor patio was approved. They're now looking to build, essentially make it part of their permanent space, is an enclosed space that will have full-time usage. So that is, we're considering that an addition to the building that does require a special permit.
Okay. Motion to move to public hearing by Commissioner Corcoran. Second by Commissioner Noonan. Any questions?
Is this a winterized structure or is it some other kind of?
Can you, Commissioner Corcoran, use the microphone?
Is this a winterized addition or some other kind of enclosure?
It's going to be a full-time permanent enclosure that will, so yes, it's going to be a full-time. It's not going to be taken down seasonally. It's not going to be like an open patio during the summer and then an enclosure in the off-season. It's going to be a full-time enclosure.
Okay.
Anyone else? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Move to public hearing unanimously. Next is 652 Commerce Drive, special permit application of Bishop Design Development for an addition to a building undergoing renovation in the design commercial district.
This is the former Sims property that's currently undergoing renovation and conversion to medical office. They're in the midst. They've discovered they'd like to push the back of the building out about 10 feet or so, so it's an addition to a building in progress, but it is an addition to an existing building, does require a special permit.
So it would be a modification of the plan previously approved.
Yes.
Does it affect the parking at all?
There's not a lot of room there.
It does reduce a few spaces, but they still have more than the requisite amount.
Guess we'll learn about that during the public hearing.
I'll make a motion with public hearing.
Motion to move to public hearing by Commissioner Alessi,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Barrett. Any other questions? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Move to public hearing unanimously. Next is 665 711 Commerce Drive, special permit and request for a transit-oriented development park designation. Application of Scala Partners LLC and Abbey Road Ventures LLC for a mixed-use commercial and residential building in the design commercial district and Commerce Drive.
This is the former Fitness Edge site on the corner of Commerce Drive and Black Rock. You may recall last year we had an amendment to the regulation application that clarified the percentage of residential and commercial within our Commerce Drive overlay zone. This is the first proposal for the transit-oriented development for a mixed-use development on this site.
Excellent. Commissioner Barrett?
When you said we had an application to change clarify the percentage, I don't think we approved that, did we?
No, they were looking, these applicants were looking to have a 80% residential, 20%, where our
Yep.
regulations were 70%, 20. There was some, the way it was, 70-30, and you decided to maintain the 70-30, and that's what they're proposing.
Okay.
Yeah, so they've now, they've
They're coming in under
readjusted
the
their plan?
auspices.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, then I will move it to public hearing. It's a special permit.
Motion to move to public hearing by Commissioner Barrett.
second.
Second by Commissioner Alessi. So we'll continue. Commissioner Corcoran is sitting for you. Commissioner Canelli.
Thank you, sorry.
No problem. So you'll just come on after.
That's fine, thank you.
Next item. Yes.
Two questions. Sorry, I don't know, but what does transit-oriented mean in this context?
We have in the Commerce Drive overlay zone that was adopted in May of 2011, you'll find it embodied as section 13 of our regulations as it was the design guidelines that came out of our Commerce Drive train station area development master plan, and then there was a provision in there that recognized a handful of sites within easy, close by the train station that might be good candidates for an overlay for transit-oriented development that promotes a mixed use with a residential component within it.
And is this the same applicant as came before?
Yes,
I believe so.
it was a regulation, it was a request to clarify the regulations, but this is now their actual development proposal.
Which ostensibly is in compliance with the numbers that we had originally had in the regulations. They wanted to change that, we declined, and now they've come back with an application consistent with the regs.
Correct.
Which is great. So we have a motion on the table to move to public hearing. Any other questions? No. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Move to public hearing unanimously. Next item is old business. Zoning regulation amendment, application of Attorney Frank Johnson to amend section 12.4 of the zoning regulations to permit dog daycare as a permitted use in the design commercial district.
Mr. Chairman, also the second part, B is a portion of this application also. I don't know if you want to call that now. I'm just going to basically give a brief overview about the entire proposal that was presented to the commission, which would include the zone amendment along with the description of the compliance application.
Yeah, I think we should take them separately.
Okay.
So
Well, there's no
you can include in your overview both, but, in terms of our deliberations, I think,
Yeah,
at least for the moment. If
Okay.
somebody else thinks that they should be considered together, they can move.
I
So
can handle
moved,
it.
but-
I can handle it that way.
All right.
Very simply, along with what we're just discussing, what this application is going to require is two actions. One is first, as the call states, the applicant intends to amend section 12.4 of the zoning regulations to permit dog daycare as a permitted use in our design commercial district. And I'll get back to the findings that we go through, which you're familiar with, after I go briefly just describing what the proposed use is all about. The application for the zoning compliance is for pet moms, doggy daycare. First of all, they stated at the hearing it is not a kennel or a boarding facility. They estimate an average of 15 to 25 dogs at the location that I'll describe briefly coming up, depending on the size and needs of the dog. Doggy daycare intends to operate at this single freestanding building with an indoor-outdoor access with fences and barriers, access to outside running and playing areas, special flooring and ventilation. The premise must be easily cleaned and sterilized. All of those types of technical requirements the Connecticut Department of Agriculture requires these types of doggy daycare centers to obtain a license from them. Part of that license, of course, is also an approval from the local zoning regulations. Again, the Pet Moms Doggy Daycare will offer approximately 2,100 square feet of indoor cage-free space with, as I mentioned to you already, outdoor space. The combination will be structured, again, to require the Connecticut Department of Agriculture's requirements. They stated at the hearing the proposed hours would be Monday through Friday, a full day, 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. There would be half-day sessions, 6:30 to noon, and a p.m. half-day session, 1 to 6:30. And then they mentioned weekend hours are to be announced, so it will be open on a weekend. At this point, they didn't have any particular hours. Essentially, it would be probably pretty close to what is being proposed for during the week. Again, just to go over again, just for the compliance aspect of this, the proposed building is located at 154 Kings Highway Cutoff. Sure. It's a single-story commercial structure built in 1953. The doggy daycare will occupy the entire building. The exterior of the building will remain unchanged. They will not be making any changes to the structure itself, other than the interior renovations that I briefly described for you and that they described at the hearing. There will be an outdoor dog run in the back of the building. There is parking for the staff on the site as well as the client's owners, clients being the dog, of course, which do not drive, and the one-way circular driveway in front of the building. The one-way circular driveway in front of the building would be utilized for a drop-off and pickup. So, that was a brief overview of what was presented at the hearing to you. Now, what I'd like to do, as the chairman had mentioned, this is basically two separate actions. What I'll do now, if you think is appropriate, Matt, is I'll go over the findings for the action to the amendment. Depending on how that goes, if it's approved, we'll move on, and I'll outline again the compliance. Again, you've heard these types of findings before. These are findings required by state statutes that basically enable you to amend your regulations, create your zoning regulations. They're a little different than when you're amending zone changing a piece of property, but they sound very similar. The first finding would be that time, experience, and reasonable planning for contemporary and future conditions indicates the need for the proposed zone amendment. The second one is, it has been demonstrated that this proposed zone amendment is warranted and would serve the general health, welfare, safety of the town of Fairfield. And three, that the proposed zone amendment promotes a type of development that would serve to protect property values in the neighborhood and enhance the neighborhood and the community. Those are the findings you need to make positively to approve the amendment. With that, I'll answer any questions, but that's would be your first step.
Very good, thank you.
The motion?
Motion?
On the item that you called, I would move that we deny the application to amend the regulations.
I have a motion to deny by Commissioner Barretts.
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Calabrese. Okay.
First of all, I mean, in talking about the need, there probably is a need in the town, and I thought, you know, the application for that was well presented. I think the owner, certainly we're not judging her qualifications. They're probably outstanding. That's not really an issue. The first thing is whether to amend our regulations. This is to amend our commercial regulations, which applies, as it was mentioned, brought out at the hearing, to all of our commercial districts, which is really the length of Black Rock Turnpike, most of the Post Road, except for the center design. So when adding a permitted use that doesn't exist, because remember, unless a use is expressly permitted, then it is prohibited, we have to make a certain evaluation. I asked the applicant during the hearing, because they had it as 12.4 point question mark, I think is how they referred to it.
That's correct.
Right. So I asked if they would mind. I thought the most appropriate section to put it in was 12.4.28, which is uses that are allowed in a commercial district but require a special exception. And they said they would have no issue with that. And I think that is where it belongs if we're going to do that. And I think just administratively, we could modify the application, put a number on it, and pass that. The issue I have with that is that section calls out certain uses which you go into requires a special exception. This application here, doesn't even ask for a special exception because,
Well, they presented it as if it was going to be a
compliance application. And when we look at some of the other uses, which are home for the aged, day nurseries, gasoline filling station, if you circle back to the special exception, conditions approval, it enumerates very specific language for these things. I won't get into hospitals and home for the aged, but day nurseries, which is probably the closest analogy to this application, says, and I'll quote in 27.4.7, with respect to day nurseries, the use shall be situated and developed so as to create no nuisance, nor have a detrimental effect on the privacy, tranquility, or value of surrounding properties. The special exception shall be limited to group care programs for children and for a period of not more than 5 years. The issue I have with this application that I don't believe it's complete. I think to establish a use such as this, which I think would require a special exception, would require some language, which I don't think that we are prepared to draft in section 27, dictating, the conditions for approval of such use. And that's why I would deny it, simply because I think to amend our regulations, that's the type of language that needs to be there.
Okay, very good, thank you. Commissioner Calabrese?
I agree with everything that Commissioner Barretts just said. For me, it was the fact that this would apply across the board to the commercial district. And I don't think that's a change we want to make at this point. So pretty simply put, that's why I would vote against it.
So, point of clarification on the commissioners sitting on this.
I did see the, but I don't recall this, so I'm gonna let Mark in my place on this.
You're
I'm
gonna
gonna sit out on it.
sit out, recuse,
Yeah,
whatever
recuse,
the
I just-
terminology
but-
would be.
but-
So, then, Commissioner Corcoran, you're sitting in for Commissioner Kelly on this as well, okay?
Yes.
All right, good. So I have some things to say, but does anyone else have any comments?
I just have a question for the
Commissioner
staff, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Are there any designated, any areas in Fairfield that would allow this use? Any,
Currently?
Yes,
No.
okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
So that was really, I think, a main driver of the applicant seeking to amend our regulations. She is obviously very experienced in caring for animals and is passionate about this career and this next move for herself. And native to Fairfield, and wants to set up a doggy daycare somewhere in town. I agree with Commissioner Barrett. The need stated was, I think, well done. And the application as a whole, the way for what was being presented, it was presented well. But when you dig into the regulations, it does appear that it should fit into a different place. And I do think the special exception is the place for that. It would require a public hearing. It would require any applicant to come before us, show us the plans, show us their intended use, the hours and et cetera. Critical to that, though, as Commissioner Barrett's pointed out, is also a requirement for the day nurseries as an example, something which I think if we were to do this, which I'm inclined to do, not the way it was presented, if we were inclined to do this, would be also to require that there be a showing as under 24.4.7 that the proposal is in harmony, is not a nuisance, would be would not have a detrimental effect on the privacy, tranquility, or value of surrounding properties. Now, I can't speak, too much to value of surrounding properties. I don't know, and I don't think offhand that it would have a detrimental effect on the value of surrounding properties. Might even enhance. Commissioner Barrett's had another great suggestion during the public hearing that the language of any proposed regulation amendment would also include that the proposed use not be adjacent to a residential district, such that any application in a commercial zone that would seek to take advantage of an amendment, would be in the commercial district, but also not immediately adjacent to a residential facility, residential zone. I think that would be important for us to have also in an amendment if we were inclined to do that. The biggest issue that I think all of us had when we were receiving and having this application is, well, what would that, in practical terms, what would that mean for the folks immediately adjacent to the facility? Would there be noise? Would there be a lot of activity? Would there be dogs out in the backyard or the whatever enclosure there is, up to 15 or 20 dogs at a time, barking and playing and doing their thing. 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, weekend hours to be announced. If it was adjacent to a residential zone, and you got 20 dogs out, next to your house, it's probably not going to be a very attractive thing. The hours during the day in a commercial zone, is there a circumstance where there could be even a professional offices that are adjacent to a doggy daycare facility? Maybe it's next to a dentist's office, where, they need privacy and tranquility and so forth. On a special exception application, you could point out that the proposed location is in a place where all of that makes sense, and it wouldn't be a nuisance or a problem for the neighbors in a certain situation, as opposed to the regulation amendment which is proposed, which, as Commissioner Calabrese points out, could be anywhere in the zone, right? All up and down Black Rock and in the center, and along the post road, et cetera. So, you know, I really kind of struggled with this because I am inclined to make it happen. I appreciate the applicant's passion, and we don't have anything in our regulations that would allow it. I think it is a need in our town, but I agree with the motion to deny, but I would like to send a strong message to the applicant that, you know, you look at this with an eye towards a proposal that fits within the kind of special exception section that we have for these other uses, and craft some language that would give folks comfort that, you know, there would be a showing that it wouldn't be a nuisance, and that it would be a special exception application, so that any particular use could be looked at, you know, on a going forward basis. So that's my 2 cents. Does anyone else have any comments?
Just had a brief idea, or what. I think your action here then, from what I'm hearing, from no other input, is really you're not necessarily, the findings are kind of aside at this point. What you're basically deciding is the proposed structure of the amendment is inappropriate, and you're going to deny it for that reason. Now, you could use the wording "deny without prejudice" if you think that's acceptable.
Right.
There isn't any real time limit for, if you were just to deny it outright, for them to reapply, but to do that would, needless to say, take care of any of that issue. And the second part of it, again, you wouldn't, it's kind of, the findings are kind of held aside now.
Yeah.
You're basically denying the application because you don't like the structure.
Right. I mean, so I do like the idea of denying it without prejudice, because that also, I think, signals to the applicant our intention. I think that the findings could be that there was not a sufficient showing that it would, be in harmony with the neighborhood or protect the neighborhood, the third prong, if we needed to articulate the denial. I mean, I think that's the general sense of the commission.
Thank you, yeah, gotcha.
So then, Commissioner Barretts, are you amenable to an amendment?
I was going to actually ask them originally if you could, I didn't think you could deny a zoning amendment without prejudice. I didn't think it was like a special permit or something where you could do that, because there's time limits. But yeah, I'd be happy to amend it just to signify that there is no prejudice. It's really more the structure of the application. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it meets the criteria, whichever one you call it, the 6, as worded. But I think if they came back with something, that addressed the issues that we've raised tonight, we would definitely want to hear it.
Right.
So without prejudice sounds good to me.
Okay, so we have an amendment. Who was the seconder?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Commissioner Calabrese. Okay, so the motion's been amended to be a denial without prejudice by Commissioner Barretts and seconded by Commissioner Calabrese. And so to that end, the application as presented was in the nature of the compliance, in keeping with the proposal to amend. If the revised application is a proposal to amend it to fit within the special exception, et cetera, the application, the second half, obviously would need to be changed as well.
Yeah, and you're going to need, after this action, you're going to need another action on that one, which is going to be relatively simple, but yeah, you're going to have to, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, can I make one comment before you go?
Sure.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, I think one thing that would do, again, we don't have this language in front of us, but why, I think it's simple is, forget this application. Somebody else somewhere doesn't want to amend a structure or anything, they just come to the office with a compliance application because there's a permitted use.
Right.
That doesn't require commission action or a public hearing. This special exception language would ensure that anybody that wants to turn anything into this use, just as if they wanted to put in a child care nursery, would require a public hearing, a special section. So that's what I think is the larger picture that I was trying to get to. So.
So, we have the motion and seconded, and before we vote, I just want to express that, highly encourage the applicant to talk with staff about how to structure an amended application, okay? And I apologize for the delay that might cause you. Are we ready to vote? All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention? All right. The application is denied without prejudice unanimously. Next item is 154 Kings Highway Cutoff, zoning compliance application of Attorney Frank Johnson to establish a dog daycare in an existing building in the design commercial district.
Yeah, again, I overviewed the proposal, but very simply, the use is not currently permitted in the district, so therefore, the compliance could not be approved.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion on that, Commissioner Barretts?
Yeah, I'll move to deny.
Okay, and so maybe move to deny without prejudice on the same basis?
This isn't really without prejudice, it's not, as of this point in time, it's not a permitted use.
That's true, that's true.
I don't feel any prejudice in my heart, but I think it's not a permitted use. Sorry.
All right, very good. Motion to deny by Commissioner Barretts, second by Commissioner Calabrese. All right, based upon our prior action, I don't think there's much need for further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Sorry. The application is denied unanimously. Next item is zoning regulation amendment, application of William Leopold to permit driving schools as a permitted use in a neighborhood design district.
Okay, somewhat of a similar procedure that we just described to you. I will go over briefly what was presented to the commission at the last public hearing. Again, this, as the calls do indicate on your agenda, it is going to be two separate actions. You first must react and act on the proposed amendment, and then pending that decision, you need to act, a separate action needs to be taken on the compliance application. As the call stated and the chairman mentioned, this is a zone amendment of our section 12.5 in our neighborhood design district to permit a driving school use. The location of the zoning compliance application would be 1495 Rock Rock Turnpike. The driving school would occupy a second floor office space of about 950 square feet at this location where this particular proposal is intended. The applicant's intent for the space is to utilize a small single classroom of 2-hour class sessions that takes place in the evening and on weekends and afternoons. Since the students don't drive, the parents would be dropping and picking up the drivers or the children at the place, requiring no, at that point, customer parking for any extended period of time. And also when they schedule when they're scheduling the pickup, the student drive portion of the process, the drivers actually go and pick up the students either at home or in the school, and then they return them there. And therefore, they stated at the hearing there was no need at that point for any parking other than 1 or 2 spaces for instructors overnight, possibly on a minimal basis. So that essentially is what the compliance is proposing. Again, the amendment itself is relatively straightforward. As you know, in our neighborhood design business district, it's just based on the intent that's stated in the zoning regulations for the district. It's a very specific listing of the type of, in this instance, commercial uses that are permitted, and that's why at this point a driving school is not. But again, there it is. So it would add an additional use, that section 12.5, and essentially would permit the type of use that I described in what they're proposing in their zoning application. It is a zoning compliance application. The compliance application, though, would be to the commission to change in use, so it would be essential zoning compliance, not a special permit application. However, it would have to be approved by the commission discretionary on the hearings at that point, but it is a little less involved than a special permit, but they are recommending a compliance. Again, as I stated in the over our first application, I'm going to go through again really briefly, the findings, the same ones for the amendment. What you need to find, first of all, is time, experience, and reasonable planning for contemporary and future conditions indicate the need for the proposed zone amendment. Number two, it has been demonstrated that this proposed zone amendment is warranted and would serve the general health, welfare, and safety of the town of Fairfield. And three, the proposed zone amendment promotes a type of development that would serve to protect property values and neighborhood and enhance the community of Fairfield. That essentially is the findings you need to review for the application for the amendment, and then, again, pending in that action, we'll get to the zoning compliance application.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Kennelly,
I would like to sit on this.
you're up.
if possible.
Okay, very good. So Commissioner Corcoran, thank you. Your
I move to approve.
motion to approve by Commissioner Jacobson. Anyone else?
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Barrett. Okay, motion to approve by Commissioner Jacobson, second by Commissioner Barrett.
I think this is a good application. It's, the business itself really doesn't make a lot of noise. It's easier for the kids, it's an easy place for kids to walk to. No, I think it's a good use for the building.
Thank you. Commissioner Barrett? Anything?
Yeah, just,
You want a moment?
yeah, no, I mean, I think the permitted uses in the neighborhood design district, because this is a special district, and another one that applies to about 12 different districts across town, not as wide as the commercial, but, you know, there's a very specific list of uses, and I believe the way that the commissions in past got to that list is when they created the district, they took an inventory of all the uses that were in those districts, and they established them as permitted uses. So I don't think the fact that driving schools is not a permitted use, I don't think was a matter to exclude it. I don't think one existed in the neighborhood design district. And I agree with Commissioner Jacobson. I mean, the test there is something that'll serve the local neighborhood and, you know, consistent with the purpose. You know, a driving school, it's a little closer for most people, where potentially people could walk to, easier to get to. The requirements now are you have to take a lot of classes. I mean, my daughter went to driving, she took like about the 1-year program because she went very slowly, and it was all down on Uncle Road. It would have been a lot easier to have one up here. So I think it's consistent with the purpose of the district, unless somebody finds a reason, you know, why this might be detrimental. You know, I don't have an issue with this, what I consider a relatively minor text amendment and to our regulations.
Commissioner Kennelly?
I agree with all that was said. The thing for me was the approach they're taking, which is this is really classroom, you're dropped off. I was a little nervous about it if you had a lot of cars. You know, that scared me because a lot of these neighborhood design business districts don't have a lot of parking and all. But the way they describe this is really you're dropping kids off to learn in a classroom. So that allayed my concerns, at least, related to this. And I do agree with Commissioner Barrett's and with Pat that we do that something like this would be a reasonable addition to these local these neighborhood design business districts, because frankly you will make them. We've got teenagers in all of those areas, and this will make it easier for them to get this instruction they need. So I'm supporting.
To that end, Commissioner Kennelly, the statement of use describes the program as classroom training, and I quote, "For the behind-the-wheel driving portion of our program, our instructors pick up and drop off their students at home or school." So,
Right.
Close quote. So that aspect is not present.
It's exactly correct, and it's a good point because, you know, that is kind of a concern about the safety impact of these young drivers, but this is to learn how to be in the classroom.
Now that would not foreclose another driving school which did not offer that service, a pickup drop-off. So there, you know, we're amending our regulations. That is the specific compliance application, right? But you know, how would the parking requirements and such factor into you know, future different compliance applications relating to that?
Well, this is being proposed as a retail service, so it would require 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. There's really two ways to look at this. Some driving schools, at least the ones that my kids went to, they had cars on site, but those were the cars that were typically driven there by the instructors. So the instructors that are in the classroom are going to need to have a car to get there to their place of employment. Oftentimes that might be the car that they're using to drive, but even if it's not, you know, I would think that that's going to be somewhat self-regulating. I would hope from the landlord's perspective, when they vet a prospective tenant, that their parking needs and demands are not going to be overburdensome on their site and the rest of the tenants, but, you know.
And also, as with any commercial development that requires a compliance, the minimum number of parking spaces is just your first step in determining whether or not the proposed site is going to have the capacity to handle the traffic. So even if they had the minimum number of spaces based on the square footage of the space, if it wasn't a complicated, or let's put it even simpler, if it wasn't a multiple tenanted facility where, let's say at this moment, they're not conforming to parking, or that there is as a known parking issue or a circulation traffic issue, you could absolutely, and you have in the past, based on the requirements under your compliance application procedures, could deny it for the fact that even though the minimum number of spaces are there, the access and the traffic and the circulation is not appropriate.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions, comments? No? We ready to vote? Yeah. Okay, the motion on the table is to approve. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The application is approved unanimously. Next item is 1495 Black Rock Turnpike, a zoning compliance application of William Leopold to establish a driving school in a portion of an existing building in the neighborhood design district.
Again, really briefly, as I mentioned before, the application, compliance application is basically for a location at 1495 Black Rock Turnpike. The driving school would occupy, again, the second floor office space of about 950 square feet of usable footage. And as mentioned by the chairman, basically what you're looking at is 2-hour classroom sessions that take place evening and weekends, afternoons. Again, students are picked up and dropped off, and as the chairman mentioned, for the behind-the-wheel driving portion of the program, the instructors pick up and drop off their students at home at school. So that's essentially what the compliance application is for.
Thank you.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Jacobson and second by Commissioner Kennelly.
I think it's a good application for the same reasons I said before.
Given our action, I don't know that a lot of discussion is necessary. Anyone have any specific questions? Ready to vote? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? The application is approved unanimously. Next item is 145 Brookside Drive, subdivision application of Brookside Acres LLC for 2 lots in an A zone.
All right, Mr. Chairman, just to briefly go over what was presented to you, this is a subdivision application for 145 Brookside Drive. The property is located in a Residence A zoning district, which was stated at the hearing, and as you know, requires a minimum lot area of 9,375 square feet. The proposed division consists of 2 lots, one containing 40,460 net square feet, and a lot B, which contains 34,299 net square feet. The applicant has obtained approval, as he mentioned, of the Conservation Commission acting as the inland wetland agency for this proposed subdivision. And also, as reported at the hearing, the applicant also obtained from the Zoning Board of Appeals a variance for a minimum square for the proposed Lot A, and a variance for the minimum square and minimum required frontage for Lot B. Lot A's square would have required 75 feet. It's been reduced to 55. Same for Lot B, 75 to 55. And then for Lot B, the minimum frontage went from 38 to 38.08 feet. Each lot would be connected to the sanitary sewer and public water line. The proposed subdivision was reviewed by the engineering department. The applicant indicated that they will adhere to all the engineering department conditions. The comments from the engineering department included that the drainage reports met the department's requirements. They noted that the conservation department's requirements relative to drainage were provided. They recommended a yard drain and concrete curb, sidewalk, and driveway apron, which is required in this zone. It was noted at the hearing that no written request for waiving sidewalks was presented. It was represented by the applicant, however, that there were none existing adjacent to this proposed frontage. Engineering also agrees. There was some discussion about the engineering's comment at the hearing having to do with the traffic report for adequate sightline. What we did, the staff did, is we felt that it was necessary for sake of clarification. We asked Laura Pooley to identify again what she meant as far as what she felt about the sightline report, and we received the email today from her that said yes, she agrees with the fact that the adequate sightline exists, but she does stress that the area, which is also mentioned at the hearing, within the sightline must be preserved. Any vegetative growth should be maintained so that the height does not exceed a manicured lawn, and that was discussed at the hearing also. So,
I don't recall seeing a copy of that email.
no, we just received it today. We didn't send it to you, but I have a copy that will be in the
Pass it
file.
around.
Yeah, sure.
Because it may have to be a basis for, would it be a basis for condition of approval or something
Yeah.
that's existing?
So, I mean, I see
Yeah.
two. One is the sidewalks and the second is the sideline.
So again, we wanted to clarify just because there seemed to be some issue with that, and she said, yes, she agrees that the site is existing. But as was described at the hearing, she is recommending, and we would also recommend that there be a condition of approval that the frontage area, which is the town right-of-way, be maintained to the requirement of the engineering department. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Cannell,
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
you want to include any conditions with that?
If we could add them as we discussed, but I'm comfortable with adding the condition of approval as just been described here, where that is to the vegetation, the frontage area be maintained at the height as directed by the town engineer.
And how about the sidewalks?
And I would also, I wasn't interested in waiving the sidewalks.
Well, they're not shown on the plan.
They're not shown on the plan, so they're going to have to be a condition of approval. So yeah, okay, we can also add the sidewalks as a condition.
Okay,
I mean, I'm fine with that.
all right. So we have
Those conditions, I should say.
a motion by Commissioner Kennelly to approve with conditions. One is to maintain the sightlines consistent with Laura Pooley's email, and also to add sidewalks to the plans in compliance with our regulations, right? Okay.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Barron.
Okay. Generally speaking, when it comes to our administrative capacity and our need to be as careful as possible with the review of subdivision, I err on the side of caution. So for me, a subdivision is, when I'm reviewing it, I want to be as careful as possible. I had concerns initially over the fact that were variances granted that countered what I think has been a very effective regulation change regarding the square and frontage, etc. However, that has to be balanced against what you have here, which is you have in a zone with 9,000 plus square foot lots allowed to a subdivision of 2 with 40,000 square feet. So ultimately, for me, the benefit far outweighs any concerns I had about the variance and how there might be concerns about us, seeing variances in place that modify something, as I said, that I think has been a valuable change. I also don't think that, we've talked about this before, our hearings aren't plebiscites. It's not who comes in and votes, but at the same time, I do think that the neighbors coming in and expressing their concern, their their pleasure that finally the issue of what will happen with these lots is being worked out, and they were very concerned about, could this be commercial? What will happen? That uncertainty. And that in their view, two homes on two lots that would be significantly larger than what's zoned there would be a good outcome. I used to run past here. There is a long history of this being pasture land and all the rest, but if we're going to have to progress, if this neighborhood is going to finally have to progress, this is about as far as from a subdivision standpoint, this seems to be about as good an application as we could have, so I'm supporting it.
Okay. Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, I agree. We all know that when we're considering a subdivision application, we're acting in an administrative capacity. I understand Commissioner Kennelly's comments about the variance granted were granted. Once they're granted, those become the regulations. The key thing to think about on subdivisions and any is safety. Safety is paramount. It's nothing that I think we should ever really modify or say, it's like we had an issue, and maybe some people want to talk more about the sight lines. It used to be people would come into sight lines and say, well, it's close enough, 120, 135, and that's not it. Our regulations say that the sight lines have to be acceptable to the town engineer. It's a quantitative measure, and that's what we have to do here. We're not, we're not making subjective assessments, and they have to meet it. And if they don't meet it, then it's not safe enough for us. People walk in this town a lot. People get killed walking in this town. I'm not saying anybody's going to get killed here, but we should never, ever, cut back on safety. The other one is curbs and sidewalks. Others may disagree. I'll never vote to waive curbs and sidewalks. I just won't do it unless the addition of a curb sidewalk is proven to be a safety hazard by itself. So that's not presented on the plans. I'd like to see what other people think, because it is required. And usually the town engineering or comments to the applicant says concrete curbs and sidewalks are required.
This is the email chain.
Yeah.
And Laura Pooley also states that any clearing of vegetation in the town right-of-way require a permit from the tree warden. That stands on its own. We don't have to make that a condition. And concrete curbs, sidewalks, and driveway apron are required in this zone.
Right.
They've got the apron, I think, on the plan, but the curbs and the sidewalks were not, and that is a condition of approval.
Right, and we've required them in all sorts of zones. We've required them on streets where there were none before, because we have to start somewhere, so I don't believe in waiving them. So I'm not opposed to I support the motion as made by Commissioner Kennelly.
Very good. I have a question. I seem to remember we talked about this at the public hearing, but I don't remember exactly. Laura Pooley also recommended that the yard drain proposed near driveway apron on Lot A be constructed with a 2-foot deep sump. The detail of the structure should be shown on the plans. Did they correct that or did they just acknowledge that and that?
That might have been one of the things that they acknowledged. So you would
Acknowledged.
include it, we would include,
Right.
we usually include all the engineering recommendations as conditions of approval.
Okay, so Commissioner Kennelly, are you amenable to amending your motion to include that as an additional condition?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Commissioner Barrett says second?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so the motion's been amended by Commissioner Kennelly and seconded by Commissioner Barrett. Anybody else? Any comments? No? We ready to vote? Okay. This motion is on the table to approve with conditions as stated. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, the application is approved with conditions as stated. All right, next item is compliances. 22 Fairfield Place, application of Frankie Glossman for a sign plan and design commercial district.
Okay, this property is on the westerly side of Fairfield Place, one property in from the Post Road. Fairfield Place, the corner lot is currently a Mediterranean restaurant. The proposal is a 2-foot by 4-foot carved sign. It's a single-sided sign, be placed at a 45-degree angle towards the street. No wall signs are proposed for this site. The sign complies with our dimensional overall requirements, with the exception of its distance from the street. The leading edge is proposed at 9 feet. A ground sign setback 25 feet would not be of any benefit to this property. It would be visible. They'd have to do some sort of wall sign package as an alternative. but they're proposing an 8-square-foot sign, kind of angled with hopes that, you know, as you're turning in from the post road, you'd see it and know where you're going.
Thank you. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to deny.
Motion to deny by Commissioner Alessi,
I'll second it.
second by Commissioner Jacobson.
It doesn't meet our regulations. I don't like where it's placed, and it kind of blocks the entrance into the parking lot, so I think it would be better off with a wall sign.
I agree.
Yes, Commissioner Francis. Oh, I'm sorry, is Commissioner Francis, I apologize. I don't think that you're on this item.
Right, oh,
No.
I cannot ask questions.
The
No,
Tom
I'm
and
not.
Jackie.
The, Tom is for Jackie and Commissioner Coleman, you're
Oh,
not
no,
on.
I'm not on.
Right, so it's Commissioner Noonan.
I can't vote,
You
but I
can't.
thought I could ask questions.
Right, you can participate in the public hearing, but if you're not on the item in the executive session, then you can't participate in the debate. Sorry about that. Anyone else have any comments? You know, he's right, and there's no stated reason or argument as to, you know, why we should be granting approval for a proposal that does not meet our regulations, and there is availability for signage, you know, on the building, which would comply with our regulations, so. Anyone else have any comments? No? We ready to vote? Okay. Motion on the table is to deny, so the vote in the affirmative is to deny the application. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So the item is denied unanimously. Next item is 515 Commerce Drive, application of Frankie Glossman for a sign plan in the Design Industrial District.
Okay. Jim, if you could take one of these and pass those down, please. What's coming down is a kind of an aerial image that was not included in your packet. This property is on the southerly side of Commerce Drive. The proposed sign is 4 feet by 8 feet, aluminum panel with no interior illumination. The site complies with the letter size and overall dimensional provisions of our regulations, and once again, the leading edge of this sign is less than 25 feet. The building itself is 25 feet from the property line, which is the near edge of the sidewalk. This leading edge would be, despite my agenda staff comments, would be 14 feet from the property line in lieu of the required 25 feet. The image shows this property's juxtaposition with some others in the neighborhood. There's a domestic kitchen sign on the other side, and Porsche has a pylon sign, you know, within the setback, so just kind of giving you some locational context. If you look at the aerial image, the entrance to this building, that's wall sign around that kind of wall that's recessed from the front wall, kind of just to the above where the X is and the cross in the middle of the photo. There's a kind of a recessed entry there. That's where the wall sign is. So when you're coming from the east, it's, you know, they think the ground sign is important because you'd be past the driveway before you would see it.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to deny.
Motion to deny by Commissioner Alessi,
Second.
second by Commissioner Jacobson.
For the same reason it doesn't meet our requirements, I don't see there's any reason to approve it. There's more than enough wall for them to put up a wall sign, and when they submitted it, they didn't even put the numbers on the sign, which, if you're gonna make an application, at least get the sign right. So, I'm gonna deny.
Okay.
I agree. We spent a lot of time writing regulations for signs, and I think we should deny it.
It's a compelling argument. You know, they got a lot of wall space there, and it doesn't have, you know, the identification of the property on it either. So.
And I am sitting in Commissioner Jacobs' seat, so.
I'm sorry?
I am sitting in Commissioner Jacobs' seat, so
Yeah.
I'm changed.
Any further comment? Questions? So the motion on the table is to deny, a vote in the affirmative is to deny. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Item is denied unanimously. Next item is public hearing. 323 Fairfield Beach Road. Special permit application for excavation and fill and coastal site plan pertaining to the repair and elevation of Penfield Pavilion in the A zone. And for all of the members of the public that are here that wish to comment on this application, just keep your comments germane. There's no time limit. You can all talk.
For as long as you want.
Let's go off the record for a moment. Let's just, Joe?
Take a minute.
Yeah, let's just take a minute to reassess. I'm going to just take a 3-minute recess.
3 minutes. Okay.
Call the meeting back to order. All right. 323 Fairfield Beach Road. Okay, guys.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Chamberlain. I'm with the firm of...
Sorry. Before we get started, I'm going to recuse myself from the public hearing.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Commissioner Calmus. It's not because he doesn't like you.
I assume that's why it was. My name is Kevin Chamberlain. I'm with the firm DeStefano and Chamberlain Incorporated here in Fairfield. We're the architect and structural engineer and project design team leader for the Penfield Pavilion rebuilding project. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Penfield Building Committee, who's charged with undertaking the project to repair and reopen the building. The project started not long after Hurricane Sandy had its impact on the building. It was significantly damaged. The existing foundations were undermined by waters that both entered the site and also receded from the site, being funneled through the bulkhead. An extensive amount of engineering due diligence was done afterwards to identify what the problems were and what the proper repair would be. The project before you tonight is that the existing building will be raised up to be brought into compliance with the flood zone. When the building was first constructed, it was actually located in an A zone, and as FEMA does from time to time, they have remapped the site to place it in a V zone, which is a zone where waves will actually, with high energy levels, will traverse the site and impact any structure on it. So the building is being lifted 3.5 feet to meet that elevation standard. One of the most significant things we're doing is replacing the foundations. The existing building is on spread footings that bear on the beach sand. They were the first things that got undermined and eroded when the hurricane came through. The new building will be supported on driven timber piles so that the effects of scour and erosion will not impact the foundations at all. As part of being cost effective and prudent, we studied different options, many different options for what parts and pieces of the building to keep and what parts and pieces of the building to not keep. The current project involves taking the existing newer part of the building that was built in 2010, which is known as the concession wing or the rental wing, where all the nicer finished spaces are, moving that building into the parking lot, and then moving it back onto new foundations. The locker wing on the building is a very minimal construction, with no fancy finishes, no real equipment to speak of, and it proved less expensive to just tear it down and rebuild it. So that's what's going to happen on the east wing. The completed building will be completely supported on a pile foundation. The entire building will be elevated to the V-zone elevation standard. So the finished floor will be up at about elevation 14.5. That left us with a little bit of a predicament. By raising the building up 3.5 feet, we're left with this crevasse underneath the building, where the grade is lower than the surrounding portions of the site. The beach in front of the building has been raised up in recent years, first by material that was replaced there after Sandy, and it was actually made higher than it used to be, and more recently from dredging spoils that were deposited and spread out on the beach. So we don't want to have a case where the space under the building is actually lower than the beach, because we don't want to have a potential for floodwaters to collect in an area that's a depression. The other thing we noticed is that the natural profile of what I would call the dune of Fairfield Beach, starting on the east end of the site at Rickards Beach, running through the building site, continuing on past the Durrell Pavilion, is that it goes right through where the building is. And it makes all the sense in the world to us to place fill in that area to continue that same dune profile. So what we're before you tonight for is to place fill that's going to extend, that's going to be underneath the building. It's going to extend from the existing bulkhead landward to the edge of the existing parking lot, and then from bulkhead to bulkhead going in the opposite direction from east to west. It's a significant footprint, but without doing that, it would be much more difficult to redevelop this as an elevated building with the proper stairs and ramps leading up to the first floor. So we've calculated that we have approximately, I don't want to misquote the number because I know it's in your package, I believe it was 3,700 cubic yards of material that would be trucked into the site, because there is no material on site to reuse. We need to bring it in from off-site sources. It would be a clean sandy material similar to the beach sand, and it would be deposited under the building around the pile foundations to fill that space in. As far as the coastal resources on the site, we did do an inventory of them. We identified 4 coastal resources, beaches and dunes, obviously. We have some intertidal flats, near shore waters, and the flood zone, the coastal hazard area. All the construction will conform to the current Connecticut State Building Code. It will conform to the flood area regulations of the town of Fairfield, your regulations that deal with flood-resistant structures. And we believe that it's a prudent and necessary element to raising the building and making the site safe from the effects of stormwater and floodwaters.
Couple questions for Mr. Chamberlain.
Yep, Commissioner Canali.
Mr. Chamberlain, excavation, grading, other alteration, except in conformity with proposed grading plan, you don't expect anything to be different than what's on the grading plan, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Will there be any slopes in excess of 15%?
No.
Okay. Will there be no machinery or methods of equipment of any nature, including but not limited to a crushing plant, a washing operation, a screening or scalping plant operation, any blenders or bar screeners or grizzly for the alteration or processing of the excavated material, anything like that?
No, the process is going to be, the fill is going to be trucked.
Clean and trucked in, right?
Clean,
Okay.
trucked in fill. It's not going to be processed on site. It's just going to be deposited.
There's no fill or excavation within 50 feet of any or street or property line except where the property line is considerably above the grade of that line? How about that?
That's correct. The front edge of the building is well over 100 feet from the street.
We're asked to check and look into whether or not the proposed work in this, for this application will not result in the following. If you just tell me that these things will not occur, if that's the case. Will there be any weakening of the lateral support for any public right-of-way or contiguous property?
No.
Okay. Will the disposition of debris or any other public right-of-way, nearby private property or existing drainage or course, or will there be any interference with existing drainage courses?
No, there were not.
Okay. Will there be any sharp declivities or pits or depressions?
No, that's why we want
Created,
to place
right,
the
this
fill,
is what
to
it's
get rid
for,
of
it's to
it.
fill it in, okay, right, okay. After the activity, the clearance of debris within the time provided will be maintained, I'm sure, right? You expect
Yes.
that, right, of course. Setting aside the top layer of arable soil for a depth of 6 inches, this is different, it's the beach, I suppose, but I'll just let that one go, just real quick. I assume a schedule's been filed with the commission that shows a limitation on the days of the week, the size and type of machinery, the place and manner of disposal, and the requirements. All that's filed, right? Yeah.
I
Yeah,
believe so.
yeah,
We
sorry,
will,
okay,
we
great.
will work with the commission on whatever your commission.
And there'll be proper drainage to avoid stagnant water.
Yes.
Okay. No. Oh wait, I should say this one last thing. Security. There'll be appropriate security.
Yes, the site will be fenced in.
Okay, great. So it meets all of our conditions for a special permit. Great.
Commissioner Alessi.
The driven piles, are they going to be vibratory or impact?
Impact.
Impact. Any idea to test how deep you're going to be going?
We're anticipating we're going to go down probably no more than 20 feet because the sands get very dense
You
at
do
that
a load,
elevation.
and you do a load test over that?
We're going to be less than 40 tons, so we don't need a load test.
So you don't need a load test for 40 tons. So let me ask you a question. If you're driving the piles, impact, why do you have to backfill around the piles afterwards? It's not like it's a vibratory, you know, you're vibratory, you're driving them in.
It's not really the effect of the pile driving causing the sands
No,
to
I
settle around the
understand
pile. It's just the fact that underneath the building, you're at anywhere from elevation 6 to 8 right now.
Right.
And we want to bring it up to elevation 11 so that we're kind of continuing the topography of the dune through underneath the building.
All the way through underneath?
Yes.
Okay, because I would be thinking you just want to build a berm around it rather than using all that fill underneath the building when it's just going to be driven piles under there anyway.
Well, the fill it does have some beneficial effect of bracing the piles. The more material around them will help them be braced laterally, but it's really more for raising the site, eliminating areas where floodwaters can collect, eliminating funneling of floodwaters as happened during Sandy. And it also helps us by regrading around the building, have a more aesthetically pleasing design and have steps and ramps up to the building that don't look garish because you have to go from elevation 8 at the parking lot up to elevation 14 and a half at the building. So if we did that just in one shot, that's all you would see in the front of the building when you drive up would be steps and ramps. We've kind of feathered it out by having a partial step down to this terrace level under the building and then stepping down again to the parking lot.
I know this is out of the realm of what we're supposed to be doing here, but just got a question. If you have a running pile, it'll be rethought?
I'm sorry?
If you get a pile that runs on you, or a couple of piles that run down on you, I mean, we could be looking at 40, 45, just in case if that happens, if we don't hit refusal at a
You
certain way.
mean the lengths of the piles?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to know, I would say pretty quickly once they start driving piles, if they start with 30-foot piles and we
They're
can't
running
get
down,
to capacity and they just keep running, we're going to have to regroup and come up with a different solution.
Right.
Now, the solution may just be longer piles.
Right.
In my experience on Fairfield Beach with all the pile jobs we've done, I don't anticipate that being a problem because
Okay.
once we get into the dense sands, we typically develop capacity there.
And how come timber over steel?
A bunch of reasons. Cost. It's a low-cost solution, even though we might need more piles than with steel. It's a one-story building, so we're not looking for big capacity. It's a durable pile. Corrosion's not an issue. Did I mention cost?
You mentioned cost.
Okay.
Many others have.
Good, thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Corcoran?
Will there be a crawl space under the building?
Yes, I wouldn't call it a crawl space in the sense of that it has, impermeable walls around it. There'll be a lattice around the building, just to keep mischievous teenagers from crawling under the building.
Right.
But the floor is going to be up at 14 and a half, and there'll be about 2.5 feet of clear space down to the sand.
So is it designed for water to run underneath?
Yes, it has to be.
Right.
It has to be to meet the V-zone regulations.
In Hurricane Sandy, when the water receded, is that part of the problem with the old foundation, was the action of the receding water?
We believe it was both, but there was a big effect from the receding waters because it only had really one place where it could leave.
Right.
And it created, in effect, a river that brought all the sand out with it.
So how does this design prevent that from happening again?
The bulkhead's already been bridged over with those openings having been closed with additional piles and whalers and timber sheeting. So that happened earlier this year, I want to say.
So when the water recedes, where does it go?
Well, by filling underneath the building flush to the top of the bulkhead, there's really no crater left for it to go in.
I see.
It's going to basically sheet off and follow the topography either down to the beach or out into the parking lot.
And so is that, what's the material that's put in there? Is it dirt or sand or
Yeah, it's going to be sand.
sand? Well, wouldn't receding water wash away the sand?
In addition to filling in the openings in the bulkhead, we're also armoring it with riprap so that we don't have that same pronounced effect of waves hitting the front of the bulkhead and carving all the sand out in front of it.
Right.
So we feel that between fortifying the bulkhead and filling behind it, the chances of that happening again are much more remote.
Okay. So you said earlier that you were explaining that the dune would be continued. Is that such that and I didn't quite follow it. Is
Sure.
the building going to become part of the dune essentially? I mean, on your
Well,
diagram
it's,
there, where is the dune and what happens?
Sure. So on this end of the property, the area known as Rickard's Beach, you have vegetation that goes from the street up to the sand, kind of where the Peter and Van was parked last year up on the beach.
Right.
That's kind of a crest, if you will, between the beach and the street up at elevation 12. And we're looking to take that contour and have that be continuous under the building out to the playground where coincidentally it also is already up to elevation 12. So we're basically just tying in the two grades straight through.
Okay. You mentioned the riprap a minute ago. When I look at, I think it's A100 here, it shows, I assume that's what we're looking at, this stone.
Just bear with me a second. Yes, that's correct.
So when I look at the elevation on the front, I don't see it. Is it, I mean, just in the cover?
You're not really going to perceive it in elevation because most of it's going to be buried. So what we're going to be doing is excavating in front of the bulkhead in order to place all that riprap.
Yeah.
Then we're going to be burying it with beach sand back up to the top of it because we don't want that to be the prominent feature on the beach. We want
Right.
that to be an emergency protection if
Okay.
the beach does get eroded.
Now, you had mentioned the steps. I mean, if the building's going up that high, you would think there'd be a lot more steps. But when I look at this elevation again, I don't see much different than the way it is now. Is that because the beach has also been raised?
Yeah, so the rendering on the first page, I think that's what you're looking at.
Yes.
Yeah, so on the cover sheet, the rendering, that's actually viewed from the rear to the east. So if you're past
Yeah.
Rickard's Beach looking back at the building, And the beach is already pretty high there. It's up around elevation 10 to 10 and a half, and the top of the bulkhead is 12. So there's not much of the bulkhead sticking up out of the ground. The building is then another 2.5 feet above that.
Okay.
So it's not as noticeable how tall the building is from the beach side because the beach is already up there. On the parking lot side is where it was more noticeable.
I had understood that something different was going to be done with the lockers, but is this the same design for the lockers as was there before?
In terms of program and scope, yes. Currently, there's approximately 204 lockers, and we're putting back 194.
Is it the same look?
Yeah, the same finished materials on the outside, the same gray vertical siding, white trim, shingled roofs. The inside of the locker room is going to be, exposed wood framing that's painted and plywood that's painted, so it's going to be, the same level of finishes as was there.
Is it the same footprint as the old lockers?
We were able to reduce the footprint of the actual building itself by pulling in the boundaries of it and laying out the lockers a little bit more efficiently. We also, the building committee met with Parks and Recreation in terms of things like the number of bathrooms and the extent of covered deck areas and what could be made more efficient from the last design. So some of that did get scaled back, but not without input from the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Barrett?
Yes, Mr. Chamberlain, I think you've said some of these things already, but I just want to go through your letter, your coastal site plan review. We're a land use board, so some of the things you've addressed, you probably addressed with other boards already in terms of the design. We're here because of the excavation and fill and the coastal site plan, which, you described in your letter about the coastal resources, the hazard areas, the beaches and dunes. My concern, and one thing I want to get clear, and I know, a lot of this presentation is more engineering, is that we approved the previous building, it was before 2011, before it was completed. So we approved it, a building that had stood for 100 years. This is right in your letter, and that replaced the facility. And then subsequent to Hurricane Irene, the bulkhead was built. Again, that did not come before us. So the bulkhead was built, and then the building did not survive Hurricane Sandy. So if you could just dumb it down for me a little bit and explain to me how this new plan, using this existing bulkhead, maintaining the bulkhead, is going to just specifically address the issues that you found through due diligence. I know you've said a lot of this before, but if you could just answer that, pretty clearly for me in terms of what you've done to address those issues and how this new plan is going to use this bulkhead and just be an improved structure that will protect the building.
Sure. Yeah, the most important thing we're doing for the building is putting it on piles. And you could almost say everything else is secondary. By having the building on piles, you don't have foundations that can become undermined by the effects of flooding. Should it have been done that way first time around? Certain people would say yes. I would say yes. But hindsight's 20/20, I guess. But we took it to the extent where we told the building committee, if you didn't want to put it on piles, find another engineer.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions? No? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. So the way this works is everybody now in the public gets a chance to speak. Very good.
You're reveling.
I am. I'm having fun with my dream. Does any member of the public wish to be heard on this item? No? There's nobody here, if that hasn't been clear for the record, so there's no public comment. I will close the public hearing and adjourn the meeting.
Yay. And the Rangers are winning. 2-0.
Should have put that on the record.
One good.